Dear friends, one word about the language I will use. I will start in French, have some sentences in German, it's also important for me, auf Deutsch, and then I will switch to English, if you agree. I hope Nicolas complies with the rule of the game of this colloque. Alors je vais commencer en français par m'excuser de ne pas vous avoir accueilli hier soir à la Galerie Dorée de la Banque de France, pour ceux qui y étaient. C'est toujours un plaisir pour nous de vous accueillir. Il se trouve que j'étais au Japon hier, que j'ai débarqué ce matin pour le colloque, et voyez-y un symbole, pour rentrer du Japon à Paris, je me suis arrêté à Francfort. Je me suis dit que c'était un bon présage pour ce colloque franco-allemand et notre unité européenne. Au-delà de ça, je suis heureux d'être parmi vous pour clore ce forum sur l'Europe en transition. Cette transition, elle avait certes déjà débuté, mais elle est dramatiquement accélérée par une succession de chocs, comme, soyons clairs, aucun d'entre nous n'en avait connu. Des chocs qui sont identiques pour nos deux pays, l'Allemagne et la France, mais qui mettent notre unité franco-allemande et plus largement l'unité européenne à l'épreuve. Soyons clairs, ce n'est pas si surprenant. Nous partons de politiques énergétiques séparées et nos vies démocratiques sont d'abord nationales et sous tension, pour des raisons différentes, d'un côté comme de l'autre du Rhin. Pour autant, je voudrais dire aujourd'hui fortement une conviction partagée avec mon collègue et ami Joachim Nagel, président de la Bundesbank. Nous diviser, ça serait nous condamner. Permettez-moi un éclairage personnel. Je crois être en effet un des officiels français qui connaît le mieux l'Allemagne, de par mon ancrage familial en Lorraine et en Sarre. Je suis un homme de la frontière. Und das möchte ich auch auf Deutsch sagen. Eine Überzeugung, die ich mit meinem Freund und Kollegen Joachim Nagel, dem Präsidenten der Deutschen Bundesbank, teile. Wir dürfen es nicht zulassen, uns spalten zu lassen. Das ist meine wichtigste Botschaft heute. Ich glaube, einer der Franzosen in dem öffentlichen Amt zu sein, der Deutschland am besten kennt, aufgrund der Verwurzelung meiner Familie in Lothringen und im Saarland, könnte man mich als ein Mann der Grenze beschreiben. And now I switch to English, beyond personal considerations, to say that it's also a professional conviction. We have heard too many doubts in Washington last month by the IMF General Assembly, too many doubts voiced by international investors about Europe and its divided reaction to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And yet, we have just emerged from a successful experience. Let us recall 2.5 years ago that we Europeans were collectively considered to be in a very bad position. In March 2020, at the onset of the COVID crisis. But together, we have managed to weather this crisis very well, thanks, for instance, to the joint purchase of vaccines and to the SURE and Next Generation EU programs, backed primarily, yes, by Germany and France. I will then, therefore, today briefly venture to outline in the field of economics 3 baskets. The first basket is where we will succeed together. The second basket is what we differ on today. And lastly, but perhaps most importantly, what both our countries are in danger of forgetting, and this will be my third basket. Let me start with where we will succeed together, and this is monetary policy. This shock further increased inflation, which had already reappeared during the strong post-COVID recovery. Thus, after a decade of too low inflation and even a risk of deflation during the COVID crisis, inflation now stands at 10.7% in the euro area as a whole, 7.1% in France, 11.6% in Germany. Exogenous factors, especially energy prices, up 42%, and certain food prices still account, indeed, for half of total European inflation. Nevertheless, inflation has become more domestic and broad-based. Core inflation, excluding energy and food, has gradually increased and reached 5.0% in October. This is precisely why we must change monetary policy. This is precisely where monetary policy has a more direct impact. Our ECB Governing Council therefore decided at the end of October to raise its key rates by a further 75 basis points, bringing the deposit facility rate to 1.5%. In doing so, we have already removed a substantial part of our accommodative monetary policy, and we are clearly approaching what I would call the normalization range, which can be estimated to be around 2% in the euro area. We should reach this level in December. Beyond this, I believe that we will probably continue to raise rates, but we may do so in a more flexible and possibly less rapid manner. Jumbo rate hikes will not become a new habit, and we will stick to a meeting-by-meeting approach based on a precise economic assessment. Let me insist on that. Faced with persistent inflation, we have demonstrated our resolve to bring it down to our target level. And let me reiterate here what is not only our forecast, but also our commitment and our capacity. Together with the Governing Council, alongside Christine Lagarde, we are going to bring inflation down towards 2% within 2 or 3 years. I come to my second basket, what we differ on today, fiscal measures and energy prices. This is the most difficult issue for fundamental reasons, and not only questions of calendar or of personalities. Some first steps towards the necessary European coordination have already been taken. Taxation of so-called inframarginal electricity producers and agreement in principle on joint purchases of gas. The Banque de France is not an energy specialist. We are more competent in monetary policy. But let me mention 2 shared lessons at this stage. The first comes from France. Fiscal measures taken at the domestic level to help households cope with rising energy prices may be politically necessary, obviously, as well as economically effective in smoothing the inflation shock. The bouclier tarifaire, tariff shield, introduced at the end of 21, accounts for 3 percentage points inflation differential in favor of France. It can thus help to reduce second-round effects on prices and wages. But it can only be temporary. It is intended to smooth the shock, not to give the illusion that this shock no longer exists. The French government will, in that direction, courageously start to reduce support for households by increasing the prices in gas and electricity by 15% in next January and February. The second lesson comes from Germany. Domestic mechanism must, to the greatest possible extent, allow for a reduction in the demand for gas and electricity in order to reduce the risk of shortages. The proposed tiering mechanism in Germany, which called for the application of a regulated tariff of 80% of the historical annual consumption for households, and a tariff at market price beyond this 80% for the remaining 20%, preserves an important price signal and therefore provides a welcome incentive for this reduction. So these are two useful lessons across the Rhine, but there remains a very sensitive question of electricity and gas prices for businesses. Should there be a regulated Spanish-style cap or a strong German-style fiscal buffer? The European Commission is actively working on this, and I will simply at this stage express three wishes. A, there needs to be a rapid decision. Companies' worst enemy today is uncertainty about their energy bills. According to our latest monthly business survey, conducted early November among 8,500 French companies, 36% of them, more than one-third, fear that this situation of energy bill and uncertainty might have a small or large impact on their activity in the next 3 months. And 52% fear an impact on their margins. B, a support mechanism for gas and fossil fuels, in whatever form it may take, can only facilitate a transition towards a new energy mix for companies. It cannot decouple from real prices in the long term. And C, intermediate solutions are no doubt needed. I do not believe in regulated prices, nor in the obsession with marginal prices reflecting in all circumstances all the extreme fluctuations in market prices. Never do I believe that it is desirable for states, national states, to compete in domestic spendings on large-scale fiscal budgetary fields for companies. This would go against the single market and against the sustainability of our public finances. Let me say it this way. We will not beat inflation in the long term with fiscal spending, but with monetary policy, and I now come to my last basket, with structural reforms. My third basket is about what both our countries are in danger of forgetting. And this is precisely structural reforms. Crises require firefighters, but we must not become prisoners of emergencies. On both sides of the Rhine, we are in danger of forgetting that it is just as essential to be architects through two major transformations to be achieved in the coming years. The ecological transition, even more necessary with the energy crisis and our need for independence vis-à-vis Russia, and the digital transformation, which is also key to strategic autonomy or sovereignty. Real supply-side reforms and those to enhance our productive capacity. And let me stress that these reforms are different from simple tax cuts. Real supply-side reforms are rarely popular. They have taken too much of a back seat over the past 2 decades in both our countries, but they are essential for both lowering inflation and increasing growth in Europe. In addition to major adaptations of our production system, these structural reforms require very significant investments of around 2.5% of GDP in France, 70 billion euro for the climate transition, according to Jean Pisani-Ferré's last report. And these amounts are to be financed essentially by the private sector. It is why Joachim Nagel and myself have just published a joint appeal for stronger political impetus to the so-called Capital Markets Union and its acceleration, so that the new action plan established in 2020 can at long last transform Europe into a genuine single financing market. Further integration would enhance our financial stability, would fund innovation. Look at all our startups who tend to cross the Atlantic to find capital venture there, and would finance the green transition. While we are working together seriously to achieve a Green Deal, we must also do so to establish a green financing union. The latter is a prerequisite for the former, and it is not just a matter of financial technique. I will conclude by quoting a great German, Konrad Adenauer. I will quote it in English, sorry for him and his memory. But I think it's a very vivid and actual sentence. I quote Konrad Adenauer: "If two people always have the same opinion, both are of no use." The Franco-German couple, and as you know, we say in French, pair or couple, and you say in German, Motor. And there has always been many discussions about this difference of poetry or philosophy. But it's the same reality. The French-German pair has always been the driver for finding common ground from positions that were often initially at odds. I have been active in European affairs and in the creation of the euro for more than 30 years now. I can witness that the 90s, for example, with Helmut Kohl, Jacques Delors, François Mitterrand, were not the good old days we sometimes imagine with hindsight. We had also difficult discussions. So the French-German motto is not to be in agreement ex ante, is to have a compulsory, a trustful dialogue, and to come to an agreement. These very disagreements initial are what makes this relationship valuable, because it provides with it the potential for momentum and for pulling the rest of Europe with us. In this current severe crisis, it is up to us to revive it. Vielen Dank für Ihre Aufmerksamkeit.